Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 66. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess. I am your host, and we are kicking off another solo show. As you know, you probably heard last week that I was actually recording this podcast on the same day. So, not to get too complicated on you, but you're hearing my voice from last week. Is that weird? I don't think that's weird. But you can hear that my voice is like pretty not in great condition. I've been talking a lot since I've been home. It's been wonderful, but it's been hard on my voice. Anyway, I am coming to you from my childhood bedroom, which is always fun. I am back from Italy for a couple weeks, and I am so excited because tomorrow I am officially kicking off my vacation, which I will be back on from vacation by the time you hear this podcast, but I'm super excited about this because this is the first time since starting a content business where I haven't felt the need to actually edit a video or write something or record something and edit a podcast and get it up while I'm actually on vacation. It's a really weird and probably just like a privileged problem to have, but it's still a problem where I feel so lucky that I get to live and work from wherever while I'm working. I can be in Italy or I can be home, and I have that advantage. But I also get into that kind of downward spiral of, oh, well, I'll just never take vacation then because wherever I am, I can work. And that is not always the healthiest for us. So that is the thing that I am very excited about because I'm actually getting ahead. So I'm recording this podcast. You're going to hear it even when I'm back from vacation, but I'm getting ahead, and it's important for me to be able to do that so that I can finally disconnect and really take the time to myself that I need on holiday officially. Super excited. All right. Today, I'm really pumped to talk to you guys about some things that I think you'll be able to take and apply to your personal financial or just personal life or career, whatever it is. I think this topic that we're going to be covering today is going to help change your approach to a lot of big problems that you're trying to solve or big goals that you're trying to achieve. Before I get into that, I wanted to explain just a little bit about the way that I am kind of pivoting Wander Wealthy and the content I'm creating here. I think I might have touched on it a little bit in the last solo show, but I really don't think I was very clear. And I wanted to be a little bit more clear because it is something that I've recognized I need to make sure I take action on. And that is the type of content I create and the type of target that I'm really reaching out to. So I have noticed a pattern in the clients that I end up working with. I work with millennial women and or couples who are high earners. Now, I want to be clear what I mean by high earners. It's not necessarily that they make a really, really good income. And by the way, like a good income is all subjective. Like I could make a really good income if I lived in Decorah, Iowa by making, X amount, and that wouldn't even be enough to get me by decently in Chicago. That there's so much difference in depending on where we live, depending on our expenses, depending on if we have debt or not. And so a good income, whether you're a high earner or not, as far as like what your income is, that really doesn't matter. What matters to me is I work with people who are trying to take their income or take their life and their financial life to that next level. They're trying to figure out what that next step is. And they are high income earners because they have a little bit of extra money that they don't necessarily need in order to live on. Meaning maybe they have student loan debt, but their income is sufficient to cover that and also cover all of their financial needs for living day to day. So now they have some extra money on top of that where they need to figure out what to do with it. Or conversely, maybe they don't have like what they would consider a high income, but they don't have debt, or maybe their debt is pretty manageable and their cost of living is pretty manageable. So they still have this extra income where they're trying to figure out what they need to do with it. I find that the biggest problem my clients come to me with is that they need help prioritizing. They need to figure out what they should be doing. Should they be putting money away in an emergency savings fund and topping that off? Or should they focus on their debt and just become debt free? Can they invest at the same time? Those are the problems that we solve. And I just want to put it out there because I think it's important that you guys know kind of the type of problems I am setting out to solve, because it's fair to you. I don't necessarily create content for people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And so by taking some of my advice, it might not be applicable to that person. I also don't necessarily create content for people who are way in over their heads in so much student loan, credit card debt, auto loan that they don't have enough money to spend on, being able to start investing and whatnot. And although maybe they don't want to invest because they want to be debt free, but they have that extra money to put towards their debt to start getting out of debt. Now, I don't say that, or I guess I do. I mean, this is something that I've learned is, I was going to say, I don't say that to alienate people, but I guess I do. There are just certain people that I know I can serve better. And it tends to be the people that want to start taking their money and finding ways to make more of it, whether that's, they want to learn how to negotiate, they want to learn how to get a side hustle and make some extra money that way, or even leave their current job and start a business that's going to make them even more money into the future. I also want to teach people how to invest and show them that investing can help them make more money, and so on and so forth. I do cover the topics of being debt free, of having a budget, of managing your credit, but those things are kind of ancillary topics where we just end up covering them because they're important, but they're not the big steps you're going to be taking. So I wanted to talk about this because it really reflects what I'm going to end up talking about, the topic of this podcast. And that is that we need to start asking ourselves bigger questions, and questions that we're almost afraid to ask ourselves. And the reason why this kind of blends in perfectly with what I just shared you about where Wander Wealthy is going is because I've been spreading myself so thin lately on the type of people that I work with and having to answer all of these questions. So I'm happy to answer any question, of course, but I needed to narrow the scope a bit and make sure that I was targeting the people and being able to provide them with the solution that they were looking for. And I found that by answering all of the questions, I wasn't really answering any of the questions. And what I mean by that is just I was trying to be a service provider to such a vast and broad population that I wasn't specifically helping the very people that I was setting out to help. And those people are people that, I can resonate with on my story. Personally, I've never lived paycheck to paycheck. I've had moments of great income, and I've had moments where my income got pulled back, but I've never lived in that paycheck to paycheck cycle. So I'm not the best person to teach you on how to get out of it. I think the anti-budget is a great resource. It can help you get out of it. I think that a lot of the companies I work with are really great tools. They can help you also, but there are also other people out there that can help you as well. And this was a big question I had to ask myself. I had to ask myself, how can I focus my efforts a lot more in the people that I speak to? And how can I make sure that I'm reaching the exact people I want to be reaching and helping them and making sure that they get into the Wander Wealthy community? And I had to do that by asking myself, am I willing to alienate a certain population? The people who might be, maybe don't have even a little bit of that discretionary income where they can put it to work for them. And whether that's through hiring me as a coach or paying for the money program, or even put it to work for them by investing it, or hiring a different type of coach to help them make more money by creating a business or just having a side hustle and investing their money that way. These are the type of people that I'm really looking to work with because they have some really big problems that they need to solve, and I'm setting out to solve those problems. And unfortunately, I just can't solve all the problems. So that is the big question I have asked myself recently. And now I want you to, whether it's in your financial life or your career or your personal life, ask yourself some big questions. Now, let me drill into this a little bit. How does this apply to you? How do you use this piece of advice that seems a little bit vague, maybe? Okay, ask myself bigger questions. What does that even mean? Well, so often I think that we get faced with situations where we automatically assume they're not possible. What do I mean by this? Well, maybe it is, being debt-free in the next year, or investing and, actually being able to retire by the age of 45 instead of 65. Or maybe it's quitting your job and starting your business. Or maybe it's finally paying off your house that you bought a couple of years ago and you still have, 25 years of a loan left. Now, the big question that you have to ask yourself, so these would be goals, but a lot of times we write off those goals. And if we want to start making steps towards those goals, we tend to play small. We tend to ask ourselves much, much smaller questions. Like, this would be an example. So let's say your goal is to pay off your house that you still owe maybe $100,000 on, or maybe you have that in student loan debt, or maybe you just want to make $100,000 by next year. And so often we sit down and we go, okay, what can I cut from my budget that's going to save me this money? And we'll be like, okay, I can stop eating out so much, or I can stop, I can say no this one time to my friends, but that's just one time. Or I can call and I can negotiate down my cable bill, and that will save me, $20 a month, but that's just $20 a month. Now, don't get me wrong. These are all really good things to do if you're willing to do them, but there's also a way where you can create much larger returns in order to reach your goals. So an example of asking yourself a bigger question is, what sort of rule can I put in place where I actually just don't spend the money that I've been spending lately? As an example, I have been working with a couple of different coaching clients where they're facing this situation where they end up spending way too much money in their budget. I mean, isn't that all of us? We get in this situation where, maybe we're setting some money aside, but we need to really be like also finding more money out of our budget. And we play so small because we're trying to find those little tiny things, like say no this one time. But what if you just decide, okay, for the next 2 months, I'm not going to go out to eat? And I think that so often we get into this position, and I've gotten into this position before too, where I don't necessarily want to be the financial coach who tells you to stop eating out. I think that is not sustainable. However, I do think it's sustainable to challenge yourself to not eat out for 2 weeks to see what sort of impact you can make on your goals. And this might be a smaller goal. This might not be the goal for, paying off your house in 2 years or in a handful of years, or however fast you want to pay that off. But this would be something like, how can you do this for 2 weeks to assess your habits and really see if that's sustainable for you? And then what changes can you make on top of that? I think a better one, so that would be one example, but a better one might be that you ask yourself this question: how can I significantly cut something out of my budget? Or maybe it's, how can I change my lifestyle so that I don't spend so much every month? Because you're just spending all of that money you have in your budget. And if you follow the anti-budget, you know that the goal is to have money left over, but it's also that leftover money is more like fun money. Really, where the rubber meets the road is taking out your savings before you even budget money for yourself to spend. But let's say you've taken out everything for your savings and now you're sitting here and you still want to have money left over. And although I wouldn't say this is like the best approach, if that's your only approach, if you're not taking money out before you budget how much you get to spend out of your money, then this isn't going to be a healthy approach. But if you're already taking money out and then you're like, okay, now I'm just going to analyze my living expenses, then you're going to look at your living expenses, see how much you end up spending each month. And the goal for you would be to have some money left over still. And then that money would also double down on your savings goal or your debt reduction goal. Now, the problem you would be having is that you don't have money left over. So what do? Well, the challenge or the big question you have to ask yourself is, what are the things I can choose? What is the big lifestyle change I can make in order to make sure that I just end up spending less? And then maybe you can pre-save more, like save before you calculate the budget, or you have more money left over at the end of the month. Now, just to reiterate, I would go for the finding ways to cut out your budget in that bigger zone. I'm going to talk to you about like what those answers might be for you, but finding ways to cut down and then save before you calculate your daily budget. And this will make sense to you if you do the daily budget. So making sure you set money aside and save it before you look at money in your bank account and go, okay, now divide that up and that's my daily number. Okay, but what am I talking about? Because I don't want you to look at your budget and go, okay, what are those tiny little things I can cut out? Like a latte here, a latte there, or call my cable company and cut that. I'm talking about the much bigger things. And these, again, this comes into, you ask yourself a big question, now you have to make a big decision. But that's where you're going to actually see those changes happen. So an example might be, you know what? I don't need to drive this car anymore. And I'm spending, I know people who are spending $400 a month on their car payments. And not only are they spending $400 a month, they're spending $700 every 6 months on their car insurance. And not only are they doing that, they also have to pay for registration, they have to pay for parking, they have to pay for gas. Are you in a situation where you could just decide, I'm going to up-level my lifestyle or uproot my lifestyle, flip it on its head, and I'm not going to drive a car anymore? And that might be extreme, but are you willing to do it? Do you want your goals so bad that you're willing to do something like that? And you're probably thinking, well, that's impossible. I live in this place where I could never do that. There are people in Chicago, and I know Chicago is a pretty walkable city, but there are people who live in the suburbs who bike all year round to the city of Chicago. They could take the train and they don't because they bike. They choose to bike. And maybe you're like, well, I have kids. You just have to ask yourself those bigger questions. What if this wasn't an option for me? That's another good question to ask yourself. What if owning a car wasn't an option for me? What is it that I would do? And maybe that'll spiral you into a deeper question that is, okay, maybe I have to move. Am I willing to move? Am I willing to move into a cheaper place for the time being so I can pay off this debt? And that would be something like, are you paying student loan debt? And what are those bigger choices you can make? And honestly, it kind of all depends. And this is why it's really important for me to work with my coaching clients one-on-one and have these conversations with them, because it really does depend person to person. For some people, the home that they live in is their biggest priority. And I can say that for myself. It is my biggest priority to live in a place where I can work, I can sleep, I can meditate, I can read, and I can film videos. And all of that, if I can have a place where, meets my needs for all of those things, I am much happier than being able to go shopping every week or every month. I really could care less about a new wardrobe, but I could care a lot about a really nice place to live. And I can tell you right now, there's people that is completely flipped, because Italy is kind of like that. I think, I don't want to just lay a blanket statement, but from my experience, people in Italy care a lot more about their clothes than, the home decor that they have in their home. And that's just because of the culture. I mean, I live in Milan, which is one of the fashion capitals of the world, so it's pretty obvious. But I walk around in my white t-shirt, which I am currently wearing from Target, every single day. And I would do that happily as long as I can live in the home that I live in. So that is kind of my example, my personal example. But people need to sit down and ask themselves, would I be willing to live in this home that I'm not so stoked about because my priority is to get debt free? And if I can get debt free faster, then I can go and move into the home that I always wanted. But maybe your home isn't important to you, so you can stay in that home and then you can move on to your next goal. Or you can split the hairs and go, okay, I'm going to move into a little bit nicer home, and then I'm also going to start saving for retirement or whatever it is that you're looking at. But the whole point of this is just to say that it's to ask, why are we asking such small-minded questions? Why are we playing so small? Why are we trying to find those little tiny things to cut from our budget instead of asking ourselves these bigger questions? And come to think of it, whether you are a high-income earner or you are really struggling and living paycheck to paycheck, this advice can help you. We just need to start asking ourselves those bigger questions. Another example, and this is something that goes back to what I was talking about with the budget. You're trying to figure out a way that you can save more money in your day-to-day or month-to-month spending so that you can have some more extra money to go towards your goals. So let's say you've already carved out some money that you're saving before you even budget your expenses. Now you have your expenses and you have your daily number, and you manage to find yourself negative within the first couple weeks of the month. I posed this challenge to one of my coaching clients earlier this month, or maybe last month, and I said, what if you just made it a rule? And this is another, are you willing to change your lifestyle up a little bit so that you can, or even a big change to your lifestyle, but so that you can reach your goals faster. And I asked her, I said, what if you made it a rule that you just didn't, for the first week of every month, you just didn't eat out or you didn't go out with friends? Now, I'm not saying you never get to go out with friends, but wouldn't it make your budget more manageable to know that, okay, the first week of the month, I don't go out to eat or get drinks with my friends. Now, my friends are my social time and that's really important to me. But hey, if I don't go out for 1 week, I get to go out the second, third, fourth, and if there is a fifth week of the month. I just make it a rule that, I don't go out. So let's say I make that my rule. Then my friends just have that hard and fast rule. Oh, Tess doesn't go out the first week of the month. That's just her rule. That's just how she is. That's just what she does, And if you don't want to if you don't want that to be your rule, you can just make up something else. Like maybe the first week of every month, you dedicate to your side hustle, or you dedicate to this hobby that you have, or you dedicate to your family. You can make these weird rules and choose to change up your lifestyle just to make the rest of your life easier. And I think we so often fail to do that. We decide that we're going to let other people's agendas, just like social norms define how we're going to live. So it's a social norm to drive a car. So now you have to drive a car. It's a social norm to go out to drinks with your friends whenever they ask. So now you have to go out to drinks with your friends whenever they ask, and you feel pressure to spend money, because if you don't spend money, then you're not going to have friend time. Is that really true? I don't think so. But we make this excuse to ask ourselves smaller, tinier questions and play smaller so that we hold ourselves back. And sometimes we do that on purpose. Like sometimes we subconsciously do things like this on purpose. We hold ourselves back because we don't want to make those harder choices. We don't want to change up our lifestyle in a way because that's uncomfortable. And actually it's our brain telling us not to. This gets into a lot of mindset work and a lot of, just your thoughts become your feelings, and your feelings become your actions, and your actions become your results. But honestly, it's so true. We choose the easier route because our brain has been built, since we came from the era of cavemen where we had to rely on our fight or flight mode. Now we use this mechanism in our brain that used to be like fight or flight. Should you run from the jaguar or should you fight it? And usually, actually, I don't know what you would do. I'm glad I didn't grow up in that time. But now we use that same decision-making mechanism to answer, should I go out to eat with my friends or not? Excuse me, I had to cough, and I don't think I'm going to edit this podcast. So we use this same decision-making mechanism to ask ourselves that question, and immediately we're going to go to the easiest answer, which would be the most socially acceptable answer, which would be the answer that our brain that is addicted to maybe not necessarily alcohol addiction, but addicted to that feeling of getting drinks with your friends and how it makes you feel, or that if it's sweets or something related, it's that addiction to sweets. It's that addiction to even like feeling accepted. And although, yeah, I do think it's important to make sure you have social time. I don't think that you need to make the excuse that your friends are allowed to make you not reach your goals. And you are completely capable of changing up your life or your lifestyle and asking that big question. What do I need to do? What sort of big shift do I need to make in order to make it a no-brainer and non-negotiable that I actually reach this goal on time? And so often it's that we can do that. We just have to be willing to do something differently. And so my suggestion to one of my clients was just say that first week of the month, you don't go out. And the rest of the month, you have a much more manageable budget. Because again, if you follow the anti-budget, you know that it adds up throughout the month. So if you can add up a lot of money, then you have more money you can manage, because her problem was getting negative and not being able to crawl out. Well, technically you aren't allowed to go negative with your anti-budget. So if you actually have a big buffer that you can work off of, you're way more likely to have that money left over at the end of the month, where you can add that on top of the money you're already saving towards that goal so that you can reach your goal faster. Going back to the car situation, we should not let society or social norms determine what we should or should not do with our money. And sometimes it's that, okay, let's say you don't cut out a car entirely, but let's say you just sell the car that is unaffordable and you use some of your savings to buy a used car. And it could be a new to you used car, but it's a used car. And you drive that used car because you can buy it. You don't have to finance it. And now you drive that. It's cheaper to insure. Maybe it has better gas mileage. Maybe it's less expensive to upkeep and maintain. A lot of people think that like used cars are more expensive to maintain, but sometimes like people who drive around expensive foreign cars, it's way more expensive. And I mean new expensive foreign cars. It's way more expensive to upkeep a new foreign car than it is to upkeep a car that was made in the US and it is used. You know, I know that cars get old and they depreciate and things break. Excuse me. But it's still cheaper to upkeep a car that is local. And by that, I mean, you're going to have people that can fix it a lot more frequently and more populated in your area than a foreign expensive car. So consider these changes. I know that they're hard, but they are changes that can actually have a driving impact on your life rather than having to try to find those little tiny tweaks that you can make. And I know why we do this. We do this because it's easy to say, I'm going to just stop buying lattes. And maybe you can do that for a month or two. But if that is actually something you enjoy doing, you need to start getting creative and think of different ways. And a lot of times we don't do that because it's not comfortable to us. We're not willing to make that lifestyle change. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think it is a really good lesson to just start deciding that you're going to ask yourself bigger and harder questions. Choose to stop taking the easy route. And I'm going to challenge you. Make a list of 2 to 3 maybe taboo, probably socially unacceptable, and a little bit uncomfortable things that you could do that could actually end up saving you a big chunk of change. And I'm talking like $200 to $1,200 a month, because there are things. It could be as big as having to sell your house and move into, downsizing. And people do that all the time. Or maybe just choosing to live like a minimalist and actually making that lifestyle change to live like a minimalist, where you end up stopping shopping and collecting shit. I'm going to say it. And you just choose to start living more minimally and putting your priorities elsewhere. So I'm posing that challenge to you. I think it is a really key thing to start asking yourself. And I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'd love for you to share, those 2 to 3 big changes you could make. You don't have to commit to them right now. I would love it if you would, but just start asking yourself these bigger questions. Figure out what that big problem is, and then start asking yourself, okay, what is a big thing I can do? And even if you just start planning that question in your head, over time, your brain will start subconsciously working on the answer to that question, and it'll feed you answers that'll go, oh my gosh, no, never, I couldn't do that. But then you start thinking, well, maybe I could. And that's what I want you to do, is actively go, but what if I could do that? What if I did know the answer to that? And that is where I'm going to leave you today. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this solo show. Let me know if you did. Come join the Wealthy Wanderers. That's where I want to hear about everything. You can also check out the show notes. There won't be much there because I didn't reference anything specific. But you can always check out the show notes by going to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 66. But you can also come to the Wealthy Wanderers and start a conversation. And I would love for you to post, even be the first person to say, hey, I listened to Tess's solo show. She asked, what are some bigger questions that we can start asking ourselves? And what are some big lifestyle changes we could potentially start making? And this is where I'm going to share. And just share it and see who else has listened to this, who else is willing to share, and use that thread to hold yourself accountable, or to at least get it out into the ethosphere. I don't know if that's a real term, but I'm going to use it. Get it out into the ethosphere and, just get it out there, and then let that question and your little brain or big brain, your brain, let the little mechanism in your brain work on the answer. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you don't feel too alienated with the kind of new route that Wander Wealthy is going, but I had to ask myself that big question, and I had to commit, and I decided I'm going to commit to the people whose story I can resonate with, and this is the story I can share with you, is if you're ready to make these bigger changes, to start investing, to start negotiating for a higher income, to start figuring out how to achieve the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 30-year goals that you have, this is the place you want to be. If you want to start playing bigger, if you want to be a higher earning woman, especially those millennial women like me, if you want to join this wonderful place that is going to support you in doing that, then this is the place for you. All right, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I hope you wander wealthy. Bye.